Question 1. The prevailing attitude toward data credibility highlights the importance of validation and consistency checks in lifecycle assessment (LCA). Dr. Alvarez is auditing a company that has submitted its LCA report with datasets sourced from multiple databases of varying age and geographical origin. During the review, he notices that energy input values for similar processes vary significantly without justification. What should Dr. Alvarez focus on to ensure the integrity of the data in line with ISO 14044, 2006? A. Determine whether the process flow diagrams were updated regularly. B. Evaluate the data consistency in terms of time-related and technological representativeness. C. Cross-check whether the company used only peer-reviewed journals for secondary data. D. Verify if the normalization step was skipped to avoid distortion of results. Answer. Correct answer. B. Evaluate the data consistency in terms of time-related and technological representativeness. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.2.3.6 mandates that data must be consistent and validated for quality. Evaluation must include representativeness across time, geography, and technology. Discrepancies in energy input suggest a failure in data consistency. Simply using peer sources C or relying on flow diagram updates A doesn't assure quality. Skipping normalization D isn't relevant to validation. Consistency checks ensure meaningful, transparent comparisons and support credible conclusions. Question 2. In the context of life cycle impact assessment (LCA), what is the primary purpose of this phase according to ISO 14044, 2006? A. To compile all life cycle inventory data. B. To evaluate the significance of potential environmental impacts. C. To determine market competitiveness of a product. D. To document organizational policy decisions on environmental practices. Answer. Correct answer. B. To evaluate the significance of potential environmental impacts. Explanation. The LCA phase, per ISO 14044 Clause 4.4, aims to assess the magnitude and relevance of potential environmental impacts using LCI results. This evaluation supports better environmental decisions by connecting inventory data to environmental consequences. Options A and D relate to other phases, LCI and interpretation, and C falls outside the standard scope. LCA is about understanding impact, not marketing or policy enforcement. Question 3. While examining an LCA process, ISTA Sato finds that the study did not properly assign emissions to their relevant impact categories. Furthermore, the midpoint indicators are applied inconsistently across impact categories. What critical misstep does this represent under ISO 14044, 2006 guidelines? A. Misapplication of system boundaries. B. Faulty sensitivity analysis. C. Errors in classification and characterization. D. Inadequate inventory compilation. Answer. Correct answer. C. Errors in classification and characterization. Explanation. Classification involves assigning LCI results to impact categories, Clause 4.4.2, and characterization quantifies them, Clause 4.4.3. Inconsistent use of indicators and misassigning emissions reflect flawed classification characterization. These are central to LCA's credibility. System boundaries A or sensitivity B come later in interpretation. Inventory issues D don't explain the incorrect midpoint use. These errors can mislead interpretation and undermine decision-making. Question 4. From a practical standpoint, when planning a third-party LCA audit for a multinational company, what is the auditor's first responsibility in ensuring alignment with ISO 14044 and ISO 14044 guidelines? A. Ensure the audit plan aligns with the company's marketing strategy. B. Determine scope, criteria, and objectives in consultation with the client. C. Collect and review all financial records related to product design. D. Prepare corrective action procedures before starting the audit. Answer. Correct answer. B. Determine scope, criteria, and objectives in consultation with the client. Explanation. According to ISO 14044 Clause 6, the planning phase begins by defining the audit scope, criteria, and objectives. This aligns expectations, boundaries, and ensures relevance. Option A is unrelated. Financials. C. are beyond an LCA auditor's remit unless related to inventory cost data, and D is premature without findings. Planning must prioritize focus, impartiality, and alignment with ISO principles. Question 5. Despite the fact that co-products are produced simultaneously in a multi-output process, is fairer allocated all environmental burdens to the main product without justification. During an audit, what issue does this raise under ISO 14044, 2006? A. Unethical data manipulation. B. Violation of product system boundary limits. C. Improper data allocation lacking justification or sensitivity checks. D. Failure in defining functional unit. Answer. Correct answer. C. Improper data allocation lacking justification or sensitivity checks. Explanation. Clause 4342 of ISO 14044 requires allocation to follow a hierarchy, avoiding allocation, then physical relationships, then economic allocation. Unjustified burden assignment violates transparency and objectivity, especially without sensitivity analysis to support choices. Ethical breach state may be too strong. Is system boundaries, B, and functional units, D, are separate constructs. Proper allocation maintains result validity and supports comparative assertions. Question 6. The foundation of third-party credibility in comparative assertions relies on what critical review principle per ISO 14044, 2006? A. Reviewer must have financial interest in the product. B. Review must be done only after report publication. C. Review shall verify if the methods are consistent with ISO 14044 and are scientifically and technically valid. D. Review committee must include employees from the audited organization. Answer. Correct answer. C. Review shall verify if the methods are consistent with ISO 14044 and are scientifically and technically valid. Explanation. Clause 6.1 of ISO 14044 mandates that the critical review must assess method consistency with standards, clarity of assumptions, and methodological appropriateness. This ensures transparency and reproducibility. Options A and D breach impartiality principles, and B is inaccurate as reviews can be ongoing throughout the study. Review processes safeguard public and regulatory trust in the LCA outcomes. Question 7. With respect to information gathering during a third-party audit, Mr. McAllister uses interviews to confirm documented process flows in an LCA study. What is the primary advantage of interviews during ISO 14044 auditing? A. They allow for hypothetical testing of allocation models. B. They provide verifiable evidence that supports or challenges documented information. C. They replace the need for document review. D. They enable bypassing sensitive information controls. Answer. Correct answer. B. They provide verifiable evidence that supports or challenges documented information. Explanation. As per ISO 14044, 2006 Clause 6, 4, 5, interviews are used to corroborate documents and observe factual consistency. They strengthen evidence-based auditing by offering first-hand explanations. They do not replace documents. C. Nor are they for hypothetical modeling. A. Bypassing controls. D. Is unethical. Interview techniques improve the accuracy and completeness of audit findings. Question 8. When presented with the interpretation phase of an LCA, which of the following actions best aligns with identifying significant issues under ISO 14044, 2006? A. Reviewing input-output flows for financial feasibility. B. Comparing different environmental labeling methods. C. Evaluating contributions of processes to overall impact categories. D. Assigning arbitrary weight to impact categories. Answer. Correct answer. C. Evaluating contributions of processes to overall impact categories. Explanation. Clause 4.5.3 of ISO 14044 emphasizes identifying significant issues by analyzing the relative importance of process contributions, assumptions, and data quality. It helps guide conclusions and recommendations. Financials A and labeling. B are out of scope and arbitrary weighting. D. Scientific rigor. Interpretation ensures conclusions are substantiated and informative for decision-making. Question 9. The core principles of LCA require that the functional unit be clearly defined and measurable. In a study comparing reusable and single-use cups, one aspect of the functional unit ensures fair comparison under ISO 14044. 2006. A. Cost of cup per unit produced. B. Number of uses over a defined service life. C. Aesthetic and color choices available. D. User satisfaction survey results. Answer. Correct answer. B. Number of uses over a defined service life. Explanation. According to ISO 14044 Clause 4232, the functional unit quantifies the function of a product system in a way that enables comparison. Reusable items must account for service life and use cycles, ensuring environmental impacts are fairly distributed. Cost. A. Aesthetics. C. Or user satisfaction. D. Don't meet required objectivity or functional relevance. Question 10. To illustrate this point, Kotri discovers repeated nonconformities in emission data sources during multiple audits of a biofuel company. What is the auditor's best course of action based on ISO 14044 2006 when conducting a root cause analysis? A. Accept the nonconformity as a one-time data entry error. B. Recommend new documentation templates. C. Investigate systemic failures such as inadequate data validation procedures. D. Advise reducing the scope of the audit to avoid recurrence. Answer. Correct answer. C. Investigate systemic failures such as inadequate data validation procedures. Explanation. Clause 6.6. 2 of ISO 14044 stresses identifying underlying causes, not just symptoms. Recurrence suggests deeper flaws like gaps in process design or training. Accepting errors. A. Or changing templates. B. May treat symptoms, not causes. Reducing audit scope. D. Compromises integrity. Cause analysis improves system robustness and ensures long-term compliance. Question 11. In light of recent developments in LCA, data sourcing is new and is evaluating a new suppliers database for inclusion in products' life cycle inventory. She notices inconsistencies in geographic coverage and age of the data sets. Which of the following data quality requirements must she prioritize under ISO 14044 2006 to ensure reliability and comparability? A. Legal ownership and intellectual property rights. B. Technological, geographical, and temporal representativeness. C. Ease of export into software tools. D. Availability of peer-reviewed publications. Answer. Correct answer. B. Technological, geographical, and temporal representativeness. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4236 requires data quality to be assessed in terms of representativeness across time, geography, and technology. These criteria ensure data aligns with the product, system, and goal. Legal ownership. A. And peer review. D. May support credibility but are not core data quality metrics. Software exportability. C. Is a convenience, not a quality measure. Question 12. The underlying principle of impartiality is crucial in environmental auditing. Mr. Peterson, an experienced auditor, is offered a consulting role by the company he is scheduled to audit in 3 weeks. According to ISO 14044 and ISO 14044, how should Mr. Peterson proceed? A. Accept the role and disclose the relationship post-audit. B. Proceed with the audit ensuring documentation is thorough. C. Decline or recuse himself due to a conflict of interest. D. Accept the role and request a peer review to verify findings. Answer. Correct answer. C. Decline or recuse himself due to a conflict of interest. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4 mandates that auditors maintain independence and avoid any conflict of interest that may compromise objectivity. Accepting the consulting role undermines impartiality and credibility. Peer reviews. D. Don't remove bias. Documentation. B. Doesn't negate ethical breaches. Transparency alone. A. Sufficient. Ethical conduct is non-negotiable in third-party audits. Question 13. As demonstrated by a complex LCA, a chemical refinery producing multiple outputs, Istatan is tasked with ensuring burdens are distributed fairly. What should he prioritize under ISO 14044 2006 when allocation cannot be avoided? A. Assign burdens based on market popularity of products. B. Use A physical relationship such as mass or energy content. C. Split environmental impacts evenly among all products. D. Allocate burdens based on employee preferences. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use of physical relationships such as mass or energy content. Explanation. Per ISO 14044 clause 4342, when allocation cannot be avoided, it must be based on a physical relationship or other appropriate criteria. Economic value can be used next, but arbitrary or even splits, C. Popularity, A, or personal preferences, D, are not justifiable. Physical properties ensure that allocation reflects actual process relationships. Question 14. During the process of auditing a European manufacturing company, Schmidt finds discrepancies between the environmental declarations and the LSI data. Which of the following best qualifies as a major nonconformity? A. A mislabel on an internal record. B. A documented procedure that hasn't been reviewed for over a year. C. Misreporting of emission values that materially alter the LCA outcome. D. A formatting error in the audit checklist. Answer. Correct answer. C. Misreporting of emission values that materially alter the LCA outcome. Explanation. ISO 14044 distinguishes between major and minor nonconformities. Major ones affect the reliability of the output or compliance with the standard. Misreporting data that alters the LCA outcome breaches ISO 14044 integrity. Clerical errors. D. Outdated procedures. B. Or minor omissions. They typically minor unless they cascade into larger issues. Question 15. When evaluating the merits of normalization in LCA, which of the following is a correct statement according to ISO 14044, 2006? A. It is mandatory for all comparative assertions. B. Normalization helps interpret results by relating them to a reference value. C. Weighting must always precede normalization. D. It is used to standardize product performance ratings. Answer. Correct answer. B. Normalization helps interpret results by relating them to a reference value. Explanation. Clause 444 and 445 of ISO 14044 state that normalization and weighting are optional and used to interpret results. Normalization expresses impact indicators relative to a reference, e.g. regional totals. It aids understanding, especially in hotspot identification. It's mandatory. A. It doesn't always precede weighting. C. It doesn't standardize ratings. D. Question 16. Through careful analysis of a multi-output process in an industrial LCA study, Dr. Velasquez encountered a situation where one production unit yields 3 coproducts, A, B, and C. The economic value of product B is disproportionately high, while C is produced in minimal amounts. The environmental burdens of the upstream processes must now be allocated accordingly. Which approach should Dr. Velasquez use to ensure methodology? Consistency and compliance with ISO 14044, 2006. A mass-based allocation since it treats all outputs equally and avoids economic fluctuations. B. Use system expansion to include additional functions and avoid allocation altogether. C. Apply economic allocation, distributing impacts based on the market value of each product. D. Exclude the least valuable product from the assessment to simplify allocation. Answer. Correct answer. B. Use system expansion to include additional functions and avoid allocation altogether. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006 emphasizes avoiding allocation where possible, as per clause 4342. System expansion is the preferred method because it includes additional functions in the analysis, thereby eliminating the need for arbitrary allocation of environmental burdens. This approach is particularly useful in multi-output scenarios, such as the one faced by Dr. Velasquez. While economic allocation, option C, is permissible, it introduces variability due to fluctuating market prices and is considered a secondary method. Mass-based allocation, option A, may distort the significance of outputs with high environmental relevance but low mass. Option D, excluding product, is not allowed under ISO 14044 as it compromises completeness and transparency, violating the principles outlined in clause 4236. Lead auditors must understand these subtleties to ensure robust, credible LCA reporting. Question 17. The contemporary view of interpretation in LCA places strong emphasis on which of the following purposes: A. Finalizing product design options. B. Avoiding sensitivity analysis due to its complexity. C. Evaluating results, identifying significant issues, and drawing conclusions. D. Excluding uncertain data from the report. Answer. Correct answer. C. Evaluating results, identifying significant issues, and drawing conclusions. Explanation. Clause 4.5 of ISO 14044 outlines interpretation as a critical phase involving completeness checks, sensitivity analysis, and identifying significant contributors. It draws conclusions from LCR/LCI phases, helping guide recommendations. Excluding uncertain data. D is contrary to guidance, avoiding sensitivity. B weakens resolved robustness. Design decisions A are beyond this phase's core intent. Question 18. Considering the evidence from a multi-site audit, Isoli notes that some environmental impact calculations lack reference to original data sources. What issue does this raise under ISO 14044 auditing practices? A. The use of external consultants must be questioned. B. The results should be interpreted using only stakeholder feedback. C. The study lacks traceability, weakening its reliability and reproducibility. D. No issue if the data falls within acceptable ranges. Answer. Correct answer. C. The study lacks traceability, weakening its reliability and reproducibility. Explanation. Traceability ensures that each data point can be linked to its origin as per ISO 14044 clause 4, 2, 3, 6, and 611. This supports transparency, replicability, and audit verification. Acceptable range. D. Doesn't compensate for lack of source references. Stakeholder feedback. B. Objective. Use of consultants. A. Is irrelevant if traceability is maintained. Question 19. From a historical standpoint, the development of life cycle assessment (LCA) was primarily driven by which conceptual objective? A. To document patents and intellectual property. B. To increase product cost margins. C. To understand environmental aspects and potential impacts of products. D. To replace internal environmental audits. Answer. Correct answer. C. To understand environmental aspects and potential impacts of products. Explanation. According to ISO 14044 clause 4.1, LCOL's core purpose is to assess the environmental aspects and potential impacts associated with product system through all life cycle stages. It supports decision-making in policy, product design, and strategy. It is not meant for profit. B. Patent filing. A. Replacing audits. D. LCA is a strategic tool, not an administrative process. Question 20. During an LCA audit, a company justifies the exclusion of certain upstream data due to unavailability and time constraints. The auditor challenges this decision, citing ISO 14044, 2006. Under what condition can data exclusions be considered acceptable in an LCA study? A. When the excluded data contributes less than 10% to the total environmental impact categories. B. If the exclusion does not significantly affect the overall conclusions of the study. C. When similar studies have also excluded the same data source. D. If the study is only being used for internal awareness and not public reporting. Answer. Correct answer. B. If the exclusion does not significantly affect the overall conclusions of the study. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006, clause 4.2.3.7 permits exclusions only if they do not compromise the overall representativeness or conclusions of the LCA. Exclusions must be justified and documented. There is no universal numeric threshold like 10%, option A. Relying on precedent, option C, or internal use, option D, does not absolve the study from methodological integrity. Question 21. When faced with a complete documentation during the review of an LCA study, Mr. Vasquez notices that system boundaries and assumptions are only partially described and there are gaps in data source transparency. What is the most appropriate course of action during the document review phase in line with ISO 14044, 2006 guidelines? A. Reject the audit scope entirely due to lack of initial data. B. Request the missing documentation and assess its consistency upon receipt. C. Proceed with audit interviews instead of document review. D. Recommend assumptions based on auditor experience. Answer. Correct answer. B. Request the missing documentation and assess its consistency upon receipt. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 6.1.1 require auditors to assess completeness and accuracy of documentation. Missing critical documents like assumptions and boundaries must be requested for further assessment. Auditor experience. D. Cannot substitute for verifiable evidence. Bypassing document review, C, or rejecting the scope without clarification is premature and contrary to ISO's risk-based audit principles. Question 22. Among the various methodological decisions, how does the definition of system boundaries in an LCA impact the validity and comparability of the results, particularly when comparing different product systems? A. It determines the financial value of environmental performance. B. It defines the environmental labeling options for the product. C. It limits or expands which processes are considered in the environmental assessment. D. It decides which product will win the market competition. Answer. Correct answer. C. It limits or expands which processes are considered in the environmental assessment. Explanation. System boundaries define the scope of life cycle stages. Clause 4.2.3.3 ISO 14044. They dictate what inputs, outputs, and processes are included, directly affecting comparability, particularly in comparative assertions, financial value, A, labeling, B, or market outcomes, D, LCA outcomes, but business consequences. A poorly defined boundary undermines both transparency and fairness in comparisons. Question 23. During the process of auditing a food packaging company, Lambert conducts interviews with line supervisors to validate inventory data. One supervisor contradicts documented flow rates. According to ISO 14044, what is Lambert's next best step to ensure audit integrity? A. Ignore the discrepancy as anecdotal. B. Flag it as a minor nonconformity without investigation. C. Cross-verify the information with other sources such as logs and observations. D. Replace the interviewee for future interviews. Answer. Correct answer. C. Cross-verify the information with other sources such as logs and observations. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 6.4.5 emphasizes triangulating evidence from interviews, documentation, and observations. Discrepancies must be verified, not dismissed or assumed to be minor. Replacing interviewees, D, or ignoring issues, A, compromises audit reliability. Objective verifiable evidence. Multiple sources ensures robust conclusions critical for ISO-compliant LCA audits. Question 24. The effectiveness of an LCA hinges on selecting appropriate characterization models. What is the key requirement under ISO 14044? 2006 for using such models during impact assessment? They must align with local environmental policies regardless of scientific validity. B. It must be scientifically and technically valid and consistent with the goal and scope of the study. C. They should reflect stakeholder political opinions. D. They must be developed internally by the audited organization. Answer. Correct answer. B. It must be scientifically and technically valid and consistent with the goal and scope of the study. Explanation. Per ISO 14044 Clause 4.4.3.4 characterization models must be scientifically valid and suitable for the intended use of the LCA. They must correspond with the study's purpose to ensure relevance and credibility. Political or stakeholder influence. C. Internal creation. D. Alignment with local policy. A. Without scientific rigor violates ISO principles of objectivity and reproducibility. Question 25. Taking into account the transparency requirements of ISO 14044 2006, what is the most critical element to include when reporting LCA results for external use? A. Justifications for excluding sensitivity analysis. B. Confidential financial data of the product manufacturer. C. Assumptions, limitations, and methodological choices used in the study. D. Benchmarking comparisons with unrelated industries. Answer. Correct answer. C. Assumptions, limitations, and methodological choices used in the study. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 5. Point 1 requires full disclosure of assumptions, limitations, and methods used, especially in public comparative assertions. This allows reproducibility, transparency, and critical review. Financial data may be confidential and irrelevant. Benchmarking across unrelated sectors lacks and omitting sensitivity analysis violates ISO's completeness criteria. Question 26. To better understand systemic issues, Mr. Oliver reviews repeated data entry errors in the LCA software tool. What should be his priority action in line with ISO 14044 and ISO 14044 to prevent recurrence? A. Dismiss the errors as operator-specific mistakes. B. Propose software training and process documentation updates. C. Increase reliance on manual cross-checks after each entry. D. Eliminate the software and revert to paper records. Answer. Correct answer. B. Propose software training and process documentation updates. Explanation. Corrective and preventive actions. Clause 6. 6.2 ISO 14044 target root causes, not symptoms. Operator mistakes often stem from process gaps, lack of training or poor documentation. Manual checks C. Add workload but don't solve the root cause. Reverting to paper D. is regressive and dismissal A. is irresponsible. Training and system improvement promote long-term compliance and efficiency. Question 27. Focusing specifically on functional unit definition, why is it a critical element in conducting an LCA under ISO 14044? A. It specifies the market value of the product for competition. B. It acts as the normalization step in impact assessment. C. It defines the reference to which all inputs and outputs are related, ensuring comparability. D. It reduces the number of data points needed in the LCA. Answer. Correct answer. C. It defines the reference to which all inputs and outputs are related, ensuring comparability. Explanation. Clause 4.2.3.2 in ISO 14044 emphasizes that the functional unit is the cornerstone for defining the product system, enabling consistent and fair comparisons. It ensures that different systems are compared based on equivalent functions. It's not valuation tool. A. Normalization. B. Separate and reducing data. D. is not goal of the functional unit. Question 20. Examining the consequences of discrepancies in mass and energy balances, Mr. Singh notices that input flows are consistently higher than outputs across all unit processes. What should he conclude during the audit under ISO 14044 guidance? A. The system is efficient and should be certified immediately. B. The inventory data is likely incomplete or erroneous and requires verification. C. The data should be adjusted to reflect auditor expectations. D. This imbalance is acceptable if within 10%. Answer. Correct answer. B. The inventory data is likely incomplete or erroneous and requires verification. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.3.2 emphasizes consistency and balance in LSI models. Discrepancies suggest missing flows, measurement errors, or allocation mistakes. Assumptions must be verifiable. Arbitrary thresholds D. Certification A. or adjusting based on opinion. C. Violate ISO's evidence-based methodology. Verification ensures accuracy, traceability, and audit integrity. Question 29. Throughout the course of an LCA audit, ISNOR identifies a deviation where the organization failed to perform required sensitivity analysis in comparative assertions. How should she classify this nonconformity? A. Major, as it compromises the validity of the conclusions. B. Minor, since the report still includes inventory data. C. Not a nonconformity if the client objected to the analysis. D. Opportunity for improvement. Answer. Correct answer. A. Major, as it compromises the validity of the conclusions. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.5.3.2 requires sensitivity analysis for comparative assertions. Its absence means the results lack robustness under changing assumptions. Therefore, it's major nonconformity. Inventory presence B isn't enough. Client objection C doesn't override standards. Opportunities for improvement D are for non-critical findings. This one affects the study's credibility and usefulness. Question 30. Through the lens of decision-making, what is the role of the interpretation phase in ISO 14044 conform and LCAS? A. To create marketing messages for the product. B. To assess uncertainties, check completeness, and provide consistent conclusions. C. To eliminate stakeholder input for impartiality. D. To simplify the inventory into a one-page summary. Answer. Correct answer. B. To assess uncertainties, check completeness, and provide consistent conclusions. Explanation. Interpretation. Clause 4.5 ensures that conclusions drawn from LCA results are based on complete, consistent, and well-justified data. It involves checking for significant issues, uncertainty, and consistency. It's not marketing tool A, nor does it exclude stakeholder input C. Oversimplification. D. Risks losing nuance. Interpretation is key to deriving robust environmental insights.